Hello, and welcome to our fourth examination of the biblical book of Ruth. Today we'll be in chapter 4, the final chapter. To bring us up to speed real quickly with what has happened in the preceding 3 chapters. Naomi and her husband Elimelek and their 2 sons left for the land of Moab. They left Israel, the town of Bethlehem, and went to the land of Moab, and there Elimelek passes away, and so do their 2 sons, not before marrying 2 Moabite girls. Naomi, his wife, an Israelite, a Hebrew, returns to the land of Israel, and as she does, she brings with her her 2 daughters-in-law, the 2 Moabite girls, one named Ruth and the other named Orpah. When they get to approximately the border between Israel and Moab, Naomi has this talk with the girls and says, look, you 2 should return now to your own villages, to your own homes, to your own families. Stay there, find men to marry, and the rest of your life will be prosperous and happy. One of them, Orpah, takes her up on it, turns around, kisses her, turns around, and leaves to return to the Moabites. But Ruth, her daughter-in-law, says to her, she says, you know, I have entirely bought into being an Israelite. Your people will be my people. Where you go and live, I will go and live, and where you die, I also will die and be buried. So she has assumed not only the citizenship of an Israeli, but also agrees to abide by the laws of Israel and to embrace the God of Israel. Because of that, she no longer returns to the Moabite gods, to the gods of the Goyim, and decides to worship the one and true living God, God of Israel. Now, Naomi sends Ruth out to the fields where she meets an individual named Boaz. Boaz is both a kinsman and a wealthy man. He is a member of the same tribal group, the Epaphrodites, that Elimelek is a member of. And so, as Ruth begins to know him, and he very quickly falls in love with her, she comes to him at the advice of Naomi and presents a request that he become her kinsman redeemer. So this is where we pick up chapter 4. Boaz has told her, he says, you know what, I will be your kinsman redeemer, but unfortunately there's someone who's closer in line. So tomorrow morning I will settle this issue with the man. He does that, and we begin chapter 4, verse 1. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along, that is, the closer related relative. Boaz says to him, come over, my friend, and sit down. So he went over and sat down. Now, you'll notice he doesn't use the man's name. He obviously knows it. But it may be that it's quite early in the morning and he's just, he fumbles around and forgets the man's name temporarily. It may be that the man's name is not given to us for a purpose. We'll have to conclude that later on. But he says to him, come over, my friend, and sit down. So that man went over and sat down next to him too. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, sit here. And they did so. Now the here that he's referring to is at the city gates. That was actually the hub of activity in a small village like that. It was at the city gates that judgments were given, law cases were performed. If there was punishment to be meted out, it would often be taken from the very city gates out into the countryside and dealt with. So it was a place where judges would gather. And in this case, they're gathering not to assess a civil case, but to determine who is the correct kinsman redeemer and whether or not he will take upon himself the responsibility that is commanded by law. 3. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelek. 4. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. For if you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me so that I will know, for no one has the right to do it except you, and I am the next in line. I will redeem it, the man said. Now you can imagine at this that Boaz's heart fell to his socks. You mean you will redeem it? You will buy it? Then Boaz said, verse 5, Boaz had been holding an ace up his sleeve, and he said this, On the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite. the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. So he said, okay, not only will you need to buy the land, but you're also going to have to be responsible and marry the woman who is associated with the deal, Ruth, a Moabite. Now I will tell you that although Ruth had found great favor in the eyes of the villagers there, she was an upright woman, a very hard-working woman, a pure woman, and they all began to respect her enormously, but she is still a Moabite, not a Jew. And it is forbidden by Torah for an Israelite to marry a Moabite or a Canaanite. And so this man is suddenly faced with this possibility that in order to get the land, in order to be able to buy the land back, he also has to marry Ruth. And he says this, verse 6, at this the guardian redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. So Boaz has been successful in his ploy. Again, back to the issue that we don't know this man's name. We also have no idea why it is we're not really given the reason that he is unable to marry Ruth, if that is part of the deal. I have listened to several different commentators, 3, and they all 3 said the same thing. The man's name is inconsequential. What is the importance is that the deal be consummated. Well, I don't know. I'm sure I'm not the first person to notice this, but I have a theory as to why that man was unable to marry Ruth. He was already married. If he's already married in that time, unless he is a king or a prince, he can only have one wife. And so whether or not it becomes entangling from a financial or cultural point of view, by all links, this man is unable to marry her, and Boaz immediately picks up the torch. Verse 7. Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was a method of legalizing transactions in Israel. That was the way the contracts were signed during that period of time. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself, and he removed his sandal. 9. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelek, Chilion and Mahlon, that is their 2 sons. 10. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his town. Today you are witnesses. 11. Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Also, through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Yehudah. 12. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. 14. The women said to Naomi, praise be to Adonai, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer, a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. 15. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. So it's symbolic that they put this young babe on Naomi's lap and said, God has given you a son, and technically he had given that son to Ruth and to Boaz, but you do see the association, you do see the longing that's fulfilled in that young boy in Naomi's heart. She now sees the one who will carry on the name of her son. 16. Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. 17. The woman living there said, Naomi has a son, and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. This then is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, Boaz the father of Obed, and Obed the father of Jesse. Jesse is the father of David. So you see how the Lord has brought into the tribe of Israel a Moabite woman, a Gentile woman, how she has earned her way by following the laws of Israel, conforming to their culture, obeying their God, worshiping according to the instructions given in Torah, in order to establish the rights of her family and to maintain the perpetuity of his name in the land of Israel. Thank you very much.